Emma's heart sank as she stood there, in front of hundreds of guests, her groom's family looking at her with disgust. She was the bride, the one who'd been promised a life of love and partnership. But here she was, humiliated, mocked, and rejected, all because of a secret they didn't know about her. The air was thick with tension, the room eerily silent, as the string quartet froze mid-bow. The officiant's voice echoed across the grand ballroom. "If there's any lawful reason why this couple should not be wed, speak now or forever. Hold your peace." Emma stood frozen, her eyes locked with the groom, Jason. She could feel the heat of the stares piercing through her, but it wasn't from the crowd. No, it was from his family. They hated her. They never wanted her, not for who she was, not for what she'd accomplished, not for the life she had built. But what they didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. She was about to do something they never saw coming. She wasn't going to object to this marriage, but she was about to cancel a $950 million deal that would crush everything they'd worked for. How did it come to this? How had the woman standing at the altar gone from a dream bride to a nightmare in their eyes? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Emma had spent her life working to prove herself. She wasn't born into wealth or privilege. She didn't come from a family that could pull strings or open doors. No, Emma had worked tirelessly to create her own empire. From the ground up, she had built her tech company into one of the fastest-growing startups in the country. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every compromise was part of a dream that she had forged with her own hands. She was proud of what she had accomplished, and she had earned every inch of it. But there was always one thing Emma couldn't escape: the fact that she didn't come from the world Alex did. She had made her way to the top on her own, but Alex, her fiancé, came from a different world entirely. A world of wealth, influence, and legacy. The kind of world where who your parents were mattered more than what you could do. Alex's family was powerful. His father, a self-made billionaire, had a reputation for being ruthless. His mother, elegant and poised, had spent years making sure Alex was groomed for success, and that success came with certain expectations. Expectations that Emma didn't quite fit into. To them, Emma was just the girl from the wrong side of town, the one who had made her money through technology and innovation, something they couldn't quite grasp or respect. They didn't see her as a visionary or a hard worker. To them, she was just an outsider. The idea of Alex marrying her, someone who didn't come from money, someone who hadn't grown up with the luxuries and privileges they'd always known, was almost a betrayal to everything they stood for. Emma had known there would be resistance, but she never imagined it would feel like this. She had swallowed her pride, smiled through the cold stares, and tried to convince herself that love would be enough. But as she walked down the aisle, the weight of their judgment hung heavy on her shoulders. She could see it in their eyes. Alex's family resented her. They resented her for being different, for not conforming to their expectations, and for simply being the woman who had caught their son's eye. What Emma didn't know, not yet anyway, was that her wedding day would be the day she would uncover the biggest secret of all. She thought it was going to be a celebration, the beginning of a new chapter, but it was all a lie. Behind the smiles, behind the lavish gifts and expensive dresses, Alex's family was hiding something much darker, something that would shatter her world in ways she could never have predicted. The deal. The $950 million deal that had been in the works for years, the deal that Emma had built her company for, wasn't the only thing Alex's family had been planning. The family that had once seemed so perfect was hiding a web of deceit. And Emma, unknowingly, was at the center of it all. Alex had always told her how important this deal was. He had painted it as a dream come true for her, something that would set her company on the map for good, giving her the resources to push her ideas further, expand her vision. He made it sound like the deal was for both of them, for their future together. But what Emma didn't know was that his family had different plans. And in the shadow of the wedding, everything was about to come to light. Alex had kept her in the dark, not just about his family's true intentions, but about the role he himself was playing in the deal. What had begun as a partnership in her mind was, in reality, a battle for control. Control of her company, her wealth, and everything she had worked for. What Emma didn't realize was that for Alex's family, this wasn't just about getting a daughter-in-law. It was about taking what was rightfully hers. The day that was supposed to celebrate their union would soon reveal the truth, and Emma had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that the man she was marrying, the family she had worked so hard to get along with, had been hiding a secret so massive it would change everything. The truth would come crashing down, and with it, the $950 million deal that Alex's family had been working on for years would crumble in front of everyone. But how could Emma know? After all, she had always believed in Alex. In the future, they could build together. But what happens when the person you trust the most is the one hiding the deepest secret? This wasn't just a wedding. This wasn't just about Emma's love for Alex or the promises they'd made to each other. It was about to become a battle, one that would force Emma to confront her worst fears, her deepest insecurities, and her biggest betrayal. But in the end, it would show her exactly how much she was willing to fight for herself. The wedding she had dreamed of would turn into something else entirely. Before we go deeper into how Emma uncovered the truth, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. During the months leading up to the wedding, Emma had felt the pressure mounting with every passing day. What had once seemed like the start of a fairy tale now felt more like a weight she could hardly carry. Every family gathering, every dinner, every encounter with Alex's relatives was another reminder of how she didn't belong. The subtle glances, the disapproving silence, and the hushed tones made her feel like an outsider in a world she had tried so desperately to fit into. Alex's family, with their perfect homes, expensive vacations, and private schools, made it clear that they didn't see her as one of their own. His mother, Margaret, was the worst of them all. Always smiling, always polite on the surface, but Emma could sense the coldness that hid behind those calculated smiles. Margaret had a way of making Emma feel small, as though she was constantly being judged for the life she had worked so hard to build. Margaret, with her graceful manners and old money, made no secret of her belief that Emma, with her unpolished background, didn't deserve to be a part of their world. "Don't worry, dear. You'll get used to the finer things," she had said once, her voice dripping with condescension, as if Emma were some charity case trying to fit into a world of privilege. But it wasn't just Margaret's cold remarks that Emma had to endure. Every family member had their own way of making her feel inferior. At Alex's birthday party, Emma had overheard one of his cousins snicker about how Emma wasn't from the right circle, and how Alex could do better. The whispers were always there, just under the surface. The glances exchanged when Emma spoke too freely about her career in tech. The way they would change the subject when she mentioned anything about her work, her achievements. To them, she was just a businesswoman, someone who made her own money, but not the right kind of money. Emma had tried to brush it off, convincing herself it didn't matter. After all, Alex loved her, right? That's all that should have mattered. But deep down, the hurt started to creep in. As the wedding day approached, Emma's sense of unease grew. The pressure of fitting in, of being accepted into a world that didn't see her as good enough, began to take its toll. The woman who had once been so confident in herself and her accomplishments now found herself second-guessing her every move. She told herself it would get better once they were married, once Alex's family saw how much they loved each other. But with each passing day, her fears deepened, and yet she couldn't bring herself to voice those concerns to Alex. She didn't want to seem insecure, didn't want to rock the boat before their big day. She had convinced herself that once she was married to Alex, everything would change, that his family would see her for who she truly was, not for what they assumed her to be. But then, the unthinkable happened. At the rehearsal dinner, Emma had tried to keep her composure. The evening was supposed to be joyful, filled with laughter and celebration, yet Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, scrutinized from every corner of the room. After dinner, Margaret approached her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thought you might appreciate this," she said, handing Emma a gift wrapped in delicate paper. Emma forced a smile, trying to keep her nerves in check as she untied the ribbon and peeled back the wrapping. But when she saw what was inside, her stomach turned. It was a businesswoman's book, a book on leadership and success, sure, but the pages had been marked with cruel notes. "For the woman who thinks she knows it all," one note said. Another read, "Perhaps this will help you understand what it really means to be in charge." Emma's hands shook as she flipped through the pages, each note more insulting than the last. The book, meant to be a gift, was nothing more than a pointed reminder of what they thought of her, a reminder that no matter how successful she was, she would never be one of them. The sting of those words hit Emma harder than anything she had experienced before. It wasn't just the fact that Alex's mother had handed her the book. It was the realization that they had all been mocking her, behind her back, in a way that no one had ever had the courage to say to her face. The subtle jabs at her career, at her background, at her every choice, had led up to this. They didn't see her as the woman Alex loved. They saw her as an outsider, as someone who was beneath them. As Emma sat there, surrounded by Alex's family, the walls seemed to close in on her. The laughter around her faded, and all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. She felt a coldness sweep over her, a wave of realization that made her question everything she thought she knew about Alex, about their relationship, and about her future. Was this really the life she was about to marry into? Was this the man who was supposed to love her, who had promised to stand by her side? How could he have allowed this to happen? How could he have let his family treat her like this and still ask her to marry him? It was in that moment, sitting at the rehearsal dinner, holding the book that had been handed to her like a cruel joke, that Emma's decision began to solidify. She had always known there was something off about the way Alex's family treated her, but this was the breaking point. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She couldn't ignore the way they dismissed her, the way they had been using her for their own gain. Something had to change. She had to change. Emma wasn't just about to walk down the aisle and pretend everything was okay. No, she had built her life on her own terms, and if Alex's family thought they could walk all over her, they had another thing coming. Before she could confront Alex, before she could even understand what was happening, the truth would come crashing down, and it would hit harder than any of them could have imagined. But Emma had no idea just how deeply her world would be shaken in the days to come. What would happen next would force her to make a decision that would change everything, and she knew, deep down, that there was no going back. But then everything changed. Emma had spent weeks doubting herself, feeling inadequate, questioning her place in Alex's world. The whispers from his family, the coldness in their eyes, the constant subtle digs at her career, her past, and her worth, it all started to chip away at her confidence. She had always prided herself on being strong, on standing tall despite the challenges life had thrown her way. But now, in this world of privilege and power, Emma started to feel small. She began to wonder if maybe they were right, if maybe she didn't belong in Alex's world after all. But Emma wasn't the type to let things slide. She was determined to make this relationship work. She loved Alex. He loved her, or so she thought. And yet, as the wedding day loomed closer, something still felt off. There was always that lingering feeling, the sense that she was being kept in the dark about something important. She told herself it was just pre-wedding jitters, the stress of the big day clouding her judgment, but deep down she knew there was more to it. One evening, as she sat alone in their shared apartment, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to know more. She had seen Alex's phone buzz with messages from his family late at night, messages he never seemed eager to show her. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized how little Alex had truly shared about his family's business dealings, especially when it came to that elusive $950 million deal. The deal he had told her was going to change their lives forever. She had heard him speak of it many times, how this deal was going to set them up for a future filled with luxury, stability, and success. He made it sound like a dream come true for them both. But now, Emma couldn't help but wonder, was this deal really about their future? Or was it just about his family's wealth and influence? Was it all part of some grand plan that she had never been told about? And if so, where did she fit in? With a mixture of curiosity and dread, Emma found herself scrolling through Alex's email inbox one night. She had no intention of invading his privacy, but the nagging feeling that something was being hidden from her pushed her to take a look. What she found shocked her to her core. There, in a private thread between Alex and his family, was a conversation about the $950 million deal. But it wasn't about a partnership between Emma's company and Alex's family, as he had led her to believe. It wasn't about their future together. No, it was about something much darker. The emails detailed how Alex's family had been working for months, secretly, behind Emma's back, to acquire her company. They had been plotting to take control of her technology, her hard work, her intellectual property, and sell it off for a profit. The deal wasn't about helping her company grow, it was about taking it from her. Emma's stomach twisted in disbelief as she read through the emails. There it was in black and white. Plans to acquire her company at a fraction of its true worth, to strip away her leadership, and hand it over to investors who had no regard for the vision she had built. The $950 million deal that Alex had so often spoken about wasn't about giving her the resources to expand her company. It was about using her success to line the pockets of his family, to further their wealth and influence, all while keeping Emma completely in the dark. Alex had lied to her. He had told her that this deal was a collaboration, a partnership. But in truth, it was a hostile takeover, one she had been unknowingly walking into. And Alex, the man she loved, had been complicit in it. He had known about his family's plans all along and had kept her in the dark, pretending it was all for her benefit. Her hands trembled as she clicked through the emails, reading every word again, trying to make sense of it. But there was no denying it. This wasn't just a betrayal of her company. This was a betrayal of her trust, her love, everything she had believed in. The life she had been planning with Alex, the future she thought they would build together. It was all a lie. She had been nothing more than a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. And as the realization set in, Emma felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could he do this to her? How could Alex, the man she was about to marry, the man she had trusted, be involved in something so cruel, so calculated? The weight of the betrayal crushed her chest. She had thought she was marrying the man who would support her, who would stand by her side in everything. Instead, she had been walking into a trap that Alex's family had set, one that was designed to destroy everything she had worked for. But the worst part? Alex hadn't just kept her in the dark. He had actively lied to her, manipulated her into believing that this deal was about their future together, when in reality it was about him and his family getting richer, using her as a means to an end. Emma sat there staring at the screen in disbelief, trying to make sense of it all. She wanted to scream, to confront Alex, to demand answers, but something inside her told her to wait, to think, to be smart. She had worked too hard to get to this point. She had built her company from nothing. She had built her life from nothing. And she wasn't about to let anyone, least of all Alex's family, take it all away from her. As Emma sat there, the reality of the situation began to sink in. She wasn't just facing a betrayal from Alex, she was facing the complete dismantling of everything she had worked for. And she wasn't going to let it happen. If this part is making sense, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's really watching to this point. Emma felt betrayed, not only by Alex but by the entire life she thought she had built with him. She had believed in their love, in the future they would share, in the partnership they were supposed to have. She had imagined their wedding day as the start of something beautiful, something that would blend her ambition and his legacy into a life they would build together. But now all of that seemed like a lie. The realization was shattering. Everything she had worked for, everything she had achieved, was being taken from her, right under her nose. Alex had always claimed he supported her, that he was proud of her accomplishments, but now it was clear that he had been secretly working with his family to steal everything she had created. The love she thought was mutual, the trust she had placed in him, was now a cruel illusion. He wasn't her partner. He was an accomplice in a plan to strip her of her company, her success, and her future. As she sat there, staring at the emails on the screen, the weight of her betrayal crashed down on her. The life she had fought so hard to build was slipping through her fingers. All those years of sleepless nights, of building her company from the ground up, of sacrificing everything. Was it all for nothing? Was Alex just a pawn in his family's game, playing his part while pretending to love her? With the wedding just days away, Emma was torn. The wedding she had dreamed of, the ceremony she had planned for so long, now felt like a trap, a facade. Could she really go through with marrying a man who had been deceiving her all along? Could she walk down that aisle and pledge her life to someone who had never been truthful with her? And what about his family? The people who had mocked her, belittled her, and now, it seemed, had been trying to destroy her career from the very beginning. The thought of facing them again made Emma's stomach churn. She had already endured their cold glances, their sarcastic remarks, and their veiled insults. How could she stand in front of them and pretend like everything was fine? How could she wear that smile, say those vows, when all she could think about was how Alex and his family had been conspiring against her the entire time? The truth hit her like a punch in the gut. She wasn't just marrying into a wealthy family, she was marrying into a family of predators. They had seen her as nothing more than a stepping stone, a way to get their hands on her company, her wealth, her success. And Alex had been in on it all along. The man she had trusted, the man she had loved, had been working with his family to betray her. How could she have been so blind? But Emma wasn't the type to sit back and let this happen. She had worked too hard to get to this point. She wasn't going to let Alex or his family destroy everything she had built without a fight. She wasn't going to let them have the last word in her story. And so, Emma began to plan. Slowly, carefully, she mapped out her next moves. She had always been strategic, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Now, more than ever, she needed to be smart. She needed to make sure she took control of the situation before it was too late. Her first thought was the wedding. The ceremony was still just days away, but there was no way she could marry Alex under these circumstances. No way she could stand in front of everyone and pretend like she didn't know what was really going on. But that wasn't enough. She wasn't just going to walk away from the altar. No, Emma had something bigger in mind. She had built her company from scratch. She had fought for everything she had. And now, it was time to take back what was rightfully hers. Alex's family wasn't just a group of arrogant snobs. They were actively trying to ruin her career. They had been plotting behind her back, using her for their own gain, and Emma wasn't about to let that happen without making them pay. As the wedding day loomed, Emma knew she had to act fast. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies. She needed to make sure she had all the right pieces in place before she made her move. So she reached out to people she trusted, her closest friends, colleagues, and even a few people from her company who had been with her since the beginning. She couldn't risk going through this alone. She needed to expose the truth, to show the world what Alex's family had been hiding. The tension in Emma's chest grew with every passing hour. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything other than the decision she had to make. She had to do something drastic, something that would force Alex and his family to face the consequences of their actions. But what? How could she make them understand the gravity of what they had done? How could she show Alex that the woman he thought he knew was no longer the same person? As the clock ticked down to the wedding, Emma felt a shift inside herself. No longer the woman desperate for approval, no longer the woman who had been willing to forgive and forget. She was ready to take back control. She was ready to fight for what was hers. The days of being manipulated, of letting Alex's family dictate her future, were over. Emma was no longer going to be the pawn in their game. She was going to take back her company. She was going to expose their lies. She was going to show the world that Emma was a force to be reckoned with, and no one, not even Alex, could take that away from her. But first, she needed to make her move, and she wasn't going to wait any longer. Would you have walked away? How would you feel if you were in Emma's shoes? Let us know in the comments below, because trust me, this story is far from over. On her wedding day, Emma stood at the altar, the bridal gown that had once symbolized the beginning of her fairy tale now feeling like a heavy shackle. She had dreamed of this moment for years, imagined the joy, the excitement, the love she would share with Alex in front of all their friends and family. But as she looked around the room, the smiles she had expected were nowhere to be found. Instead, she was met with confusion, disbelief, and a sense of judgment that weighed down on her like an invisible force. This wasn't the moment she had envisioned. The air was thick with tension, and the room felt smaller, suffocating. She could see the confusion in Alex's eyes, the shock in his family's faces, and the disbelief in her own heart. She had spent so many months, so many years, trying to prove herself worthy of their love, their acceptance. And now, here she was, standing on the precipice of everything she had worked for, realizing that none of it had ever mattered. Not to them, not to Alex. But Emma was no longer the woman who would sit in silence, who would tolerate the manipulation and lies. She had found her voice, and it was time to use it. With a steady breath, she took a step forward, her voice calm but unwavering as she looked Alex in the eyes and said the words that would change everything. "I know everything, the deal, the lies, the betrayal, and I'm ending it all today." The words hung in the air, reverberating through the room as Emma's revelation hit everyone like a bolt of lightning. Alex's face turned pale, his eyes flickering with panic as he opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His family, who had once looked at her with disdain, now looked at her with a mix of surprise and confusion. They hadn't seen this coming. They thought they had her cornered. They thought she would be just another pawn in their game, another piece in their plan to take everything she had built. But Emma wasn't playing their game anymore. With a final glance at Alex, she turned her attention to his family, her voice rising with the strength she had found within herself. "You've used me. You've tried to take what's mine, to control my company, my future, everything I've worked for, but you won't take this from me. You won't control me anymore." The room was silent. No one moved. The guests, once filled with excitement and anticipation for the wedding, now sat frozen, unable to process the storm that had just erupted before them. But Emma didn't care about their stares, their judgment. She didn't care about the wealth or the power that Alex's family held. She had something they didn't, her dignity, her self-respect, and the strength to walk away from it all. In a single, powerful move, Emma turned away from the altar. The wedding was over. The future she had imagined with Alex was over. She was walking away, not just from him, but from everything that had tried to define her, to control her. And in that moment, she knew she had made the right choice. But that wasn't the end of it. The $950 million deal, the one that had been the catalyst for everything, was about to be destroyed, just like the wedding. She knew that Alex's family had been secretly working behind her back to take over her company. They had been planning to acquire it, to strip it from her, to sell it off to the highest bidder. But Emma wasn't going to let that happen. With her heart racing, she picked up her phone and made the call that would seal their fate. She canceled the deal, just like that. She called the investors, the board members, and her legal team. She shut it down. She ended it. She wasn't going to let them profit off her hard work. She wasn't going to let them erase everything she had built. The deal was off. The family's plans were shattered. As the phone call ended, Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't just the relief of walking away from the wedding, from Alex's family. It was the relief of taking back control, of choosing herself over everything else. She had finally done it. She had made a decision that was hers and hers alone. But even with the weight of everything she had just done, Emma felt a sense of clarity she had never felt before. She had been trapped in a life where others controlled her, where her worth was determined by their standards. But now, she was free. Free to build her life on her terms, free to embrace the future she deserved. Emma turned away from the altar for the last time, and as she walked down the aisle, this time, it wasn't with the weight of a lifetime of expectations on her shoulders. It was with the lightness of someone who had finally realized her own worth. And as she stepped out into the sunlight, she knew that her life was just beginning. Thank you for watching, and remember, never let anyone take control of your life. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to walk away from everything? Let us know in the comments and make sure you subscribe if you want more gripping stories every week.